All right, so today I'm really excited because I have on a really special guest here. He's the host of the Michael Brooks Show. It recently just passed 1,000 members, and he's been on the Majority Report for a long time as well. How's it going, Michael?
Hey man, how you doing? Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, man, I'm doing well as well. So I thought we'd kind of start out talking about the Trump presidency, just to, don't not necessarily a number, but how would you kind of gauge or rate the Trump presidency?
It's a total one. Um, no, I mean, that's one of those questions where it depends where you're standing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that actually, if I was a Republican, I would give it a 7 or an 8.
Right.
Major redistribution of wealth, even more significantly to the top, staffing up the judiciary with the most, I mean, even by the standards of Reagan and Bush, the next acceleration of far right extremist ideologues on the benches.
Mhm.
Executive orders rolling back things on everything from overseas corruption practices to making it easier to torture animals, pollute the environment.
Yeah.
This is the perfect Republican agenda.
Right.
Not to mention dropping the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan and,
Yeah.
God knows whatever else is going on in terms of national security state, higher civilian casualties. If I'm a Republican, I would be thrilled.
Right.
Um, so I think, obviously they failed on Obamacare repeal, but they kind of there was some of that in the tax bill.
Right.
Um, I mean, outside of it, I don't know, man. I guess it's kind of like what you'd expect. I mean, the guy's super unstable, and the Republican agenda is not popular with most people. So the
Right.
question really becomes, first of all, that obviously structurally, where there's capital, there's power. So that part, basically the corporate interests obviously have like they have the most power of anybody in society,
Mhm.
and these things are their agenda. And then, the Democratic brand has sucked for a
Right.
really long time,
Right.
except for a couple of really charismatic leaders, basically.
Yeah.
And, that fight in the Democratic Party is happening. I think there's a little bit of progress on that. But, if I was a Republican, I mean, I think it's kind of obvious, I guess, if you're left, of course, it's terrible.
Right.
And objectively, you know, it's a total mess and shambolic. But
Yeah.
actually, they get a lot of stuff done. And it's the Republican agenda. It's not a Trump agenda. And,
Right.
the Republican agenda is just objectively terrible for basically everybody. And, like, unless you're on a private jet to see Conor McGregor and Mayweather fight each other, you
Yeah.
shouldn't like what they're doing.
That's true. Um,
Yeah.
so to kind of build off that, I was curious what your thoughts are on the upcoming 2018 midterms. Do you think that the Democrats will really be able to win back significant seats? I mean, what do you think's really going to happen there?
I think I mean, yeah, I think Democrats will win the House.
Do you think
I
so?
do. I think so. I think they'll win the House. The
What about the
Senate,
Senate?
I don't think they'll win the Senate, but I think that they'll probably overperform. And then so it's important in a cycle like this, even that a terrible Democrat is better than a Republican,
Right.
and that's just the truth. But then the really interesting part does become, uh, the internal war
Right.
inside between the corporate Democrats and more left Democrats, however we want to define it.
Yeah.
So, and in some of these races, especially ones where there's a candidate who's, you know, bucking the DCCC,
Mhm.
there's actually some pretty good candidates out there.
Yeah.
Um, and so that becomes an interesting question. And I'm trying to also on a local level, I'm having on a lot of like DSA,
Mhm.
socialist candidates, that type of thing. But even a guy like Dan Cannon in Indiana, I mean, I'm well to the left of him, but the dude accepted the DSA's endorsement. He's campaigning on abolishing ICE. He's a
Mhm.
civil rights attorney. That's a legit candidate. So that's going to be interesting. But I do think that I think they'll perform well, but I think that Republicans also can see that too, and there's gonna, there'll be Republican turnout too, no doubt.
Yeah, so I was wondering if did you hear about like the recording that one of the
Steny
Democratic,
Hoyer,
yeah, the Steny Hoyer thing,
yeah.
and personally that got me really angry because really what he said, it was pretty like crystal clear as to what was going on, and I was just curious as to how we can move forward to try to take over the Democratic Party or to get more progressives in the party or have more progressive representation if literally every election cycle they're going to be cheating us every time.
Well, I mean, here's my thing: is I think it's already like happening, right? Like they're not necessarily winning in those primaries where they have their thumb on the scale. And if anything, like if I was the whoever the DCCC hack candidate,
Hmm.
Steny Hoyer was not helping them by running his mouth
He
in the
definitely
bar like
wasn't
that.
doing that, but like
Yeah,
with all the stuff
well,
that they were doing though, I mean it's hard to
yeah,
combat the DCCC machine.
I don't know about that. There's a lot
Really?
of money you can raise outside of it. And at this point, if I was running for Congress, would I want the support of the new base, grassroots, independent media, excited, motivated people running a no bullshit Medicare for all, universal housing, job guarantee, calling out war crimes in Yemen, talking even about, I want to see people talking about what's happening to Lula in Brazil, all, being clear on policing and have the people come behind me, or would I want the same failed consultants that have been recycling themselves through the DNC for ages
Well, let's say it's not the
running the same?
consultants, but rather because I think that the most
Well,
effective thing they do is just media coverage and just giving them a shitload of money. That just basically there's no way to really combat that.
but I mean, we're combating it every day, man. I mean, the thing is like their fundraising totals in the DCCC are not that great right now, especially relative to how well everything else is going. So I guess it's like, I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but I think it's definitely not futile. And if we say it's futile, then it's futile. You know what I mean? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The other thing too is the other difference I would make is that I don't actually I have a problem with what the DCCC is putting its thumb on the scale for, not that they're putting their thumb on the scale. You know what I'm saying? If we were in control of the party and some guy was having a drink with me, well, I wouldn't be dumb enough, hopefully, to be that blunt on tape. But if the dude was like, why don't you get behind me? I would say, well, because we support candidates that support Medicare for all. We support candidates that know we need to radically raise taxes on the wealthiest people and redistribute it in everything from healthcare to education to housing to infrastructure. And you're a former, Goldman Sachs lawyer, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
and you're talking about, a little bit of an Obamacare bill. That's not what we support. So I feel like that's the other thing too, is I don't really, if the DCCC was putting its thumb on the scale in the right way, that would be cool.
Oh, so you'd be
You know
okay
what
with
I'm saying?
that? You don't want to have like a
Absolutely.
fair election?
Well, I mean, I guess it's like there is a fair election. I mean, people vote. They
Well,
go
yeah,
out.
no, they vote, but I mean, it's like basically if the DCCC is putting their machine behind someone, the person is running two campaigns essentially because they have two opponents now, and obviously it's difficult to combat that, the DCCC machine. You know what I mean?
I don't
So
think if you were running for Congress
yeah.
right now in a district with some progressive voters, would you pick to have um, an independent, powerful base and endorsement of groups like Our Revolution, or Steny Hoyer maybe writing you some checks and having some bad consultants?
Well,
Which
so
would you pick?
I'd
Which would you?
rather have the independent progressives, but
Mhm.
when my opponent is getting the aid from the DCCC, it's like there's no way to really you can't really defeat that because in
Well,
those
that's not.
areas it's like
I don't know. Laura Mosier just did. That's why they're in a. I'm not trying to be too difficult with you, man, but it's not. That's just not how it's playing.
so you
You know
don't
what I
really
mean?
think it's that big of a problem.
I think it's a problem, but I don't think. I think you got to just keep doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like I don't. I guess when people say like, "Oh, there's nothing we can do about it," then it's like, well, all right. So go watch the NBA playoffs. Cool. All right. First of all, I don't agree. There's a lot we could do about it, and there's a lot of momentum on the right side of it. And number two, I don't think the DCCC is not as powerful as people think it is. If it was as powerful as people think it is, then we wouldn't, then they wouldn't be embarrassing themselves and shooting themselves in the foot every other day and having intercept pieces come out embarrassing them constantly, and have candidates that are on the right side of it with momentum. Also, I think there's a difference. Like, I would say, yes, if I ran the DCCC, I would say we only want candidates that are actually left, and that is who we're going to support, is different than, trying to smear a candidate like they did with Laura Mosier. That's a whole different thing. And that was also so sloppy and so stupid that it ended up hurting them and helping her,
Okay. So, this will kind of lead into, I guess, the 2020 election. I mean, what are your thoughts on 2020 prospects? Who would you like to see run? What do you think's going to happen?
It's early, man.
It is.
I mean, I think from the perspective of my politics, as really as like a democratic socialist. I mean, Bernie is still he's the only. I mean, he's the only game in town,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that other people are catching up. It's really good to see. Like, some people get all like, oh, they're lying. Like, Kamala Harris doesn't really support Medicare for all or whatever. But that shit doesn't. That's irrelevant. The point is, he's moved the dial to they have to follow him, which is a great thing. But
Yeah.
if you're still asking me in terms of like who is, it's, and now that he's starting to talk about foreign policy and he's talking about, the Israeli killings in Gaza, the
Yeah.
occupation, he's talking about, he did that. The only other guy actually is doing anything on foreign policy right now is actually Chris Murphy. But Murphy's got nothing on Wall Street or healthcare. So at the end of the day, it's just like all of the biggest issues: global warming, you know, inequality, finance, everybody getting health care. And also, I would say increasingly you're going to see him on race and policing issues, but those things are also impacted by the other things that he talks about.
Yeah.
Getting labor unions back going again. I mean, who else? Elizabeth Warren's got some cool shit. I don't I don't hate these other. I don't hate like centrists, like the way some people get all freaked out about them. But like, come on, I'm gonna go into a voting booth and vote for fucking, you know, I don't know, Gillibrand over Bernie Sanders. Like, come on,
Nah.
of course. Let's
So
be
you
real.
brought something up that was interesting that I actually want to ask you about. So you just said you're a democratic socialist. Now, a democratic socialist is basically advocating for a governmental system, which is a democracy, and an economic socialist system, which is workers owning industry. I mean, could you kind of expand on that? Because I think that there aren't actually that many democratic socialists, at least in the YouTube commentator sphere, because most people I think would call themselves social democrats.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually a little bit loose with those terms, to be honest. But I think that at the very least, it's like my friend Bhaskar Sankara, who's on my show a lot. He said, like temperamentally, he says about himself, he's like, temperamentally, I'm actually pretty moderate in a way, but strategically, I realize I have to be radical. So I think we're at a point, and I don't know what this looks like,
Hmm.
okay? But I think, yes, in general, there's probably rough overlap with like, there's three different sectors. There's private, there's government, and social sector, and they each kind of have their own space. But I think that if you look at the way the rules of capitalism work now, in a global economy and one accelerating with everything from like artificial intelligence replacing people's jobs to mobility of capital, uh, the solutions that we work on are going to have to be much more fundamental in terms of evening out the economy and breaking up certain concentrations of wealth. So, like, nobody's talking about, oh, you can't have your own podcast or, own a coffee shop, right? Like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about uh, vast concentrations of industry and wealth, which easily could be. The dirty secret is if you kind of go into some of these companies, even like and other points like I've been around, like brand strategy and stuff like that. These places are like ghost ships. There's an incredible amount of capital, there's an incredible amount of stuff going on, but like they're actually just bureaucracies trying to, deliver for shareholders, and that's it. And that has enormous societal cost, but it's also just not the best use of human organization. And like, and to make it like more concrete, like part of the reason we know that we need to have Medicare for all is that if you lock in Medicare for all, that simplifies the system. It's no bullshit, and everybody gets health care. And we know that that's better, period. Something like Obamacare, which is better than what was before. Right. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
But because it's so complicated and because it tries to appease interests, and in that area, insurance and HMO companies are totally useless parasites. They deliver no value. You try to appease them, they still have room to come back at you. And that process will never stop. So what I'm saying is that I think there's going to be a lot more areas of the economy where we're going to have to just say, like, yeah, that just needs to be radically broken up. And whether it means there are going to be a lot more worker collectives, there are going to be a lot more nonprofits, there's going to be a lot more antitrust enforcement that maybe breaks things up into smaller companies. There's going to be more nationalization. But I do think, and the reason I do say, democratic socialist is because I think, and even if you look at what's going on with social democratic parties in Europe right now, they're in really rough shape. People need to think more aggressively because the solutions of like maybe the 40s, 50s, and 60s aren't going to work the same way now.
So you're basically, what I would probably call more left than a lot of people in the kind of news and politics sphere on YouTube, right?
I mean, sure.
Okay, that's interesting.
I don't know. I'm not trying to like, I'm not. Yeah, probably. I mean, but I don't.
That's interesting because it's kind of unique because I think most people would describe themselves as social democrats, and I don't think there's really any bigger representative, at least not anyone of your size, who's really someone more left. Maybe Chapo Trap House, but they're not really on YouTube.
Chapo is on YouTube, but no, I like Jacobin, Chapo.
Yeah.
Dead Pundit Society, Benjamin Dixon's very far to the left. People there's a crew. I don't.
Is that a movement you're trying to build?
What's up?
Is that a movement you're trying to build?
It's happening.
It's happening.
It's happening. It's happening all over. And I think I think everybody's moving to the left. But and people just need to. It's a good idea, and I know it's so funny because that fucking crazy crying professor guy is freaking everybody out about Marxism. But
I didn't hear about that. What was that about?
Oh no. I'm honestly forgetting his name. No, you know what I'm talking about. Jordan Peterson.
Oh, Jordan Peterson. Oh, yeah, okay. I was gonna say I didn't hear about that.
It's crazy and the whole thing, blah blah blah.
So I guess we'll enter into Jordan Peterson.
It's a good idea. I mean, everybody should read some Marx, and it is a good idea to have a bigger understanding of how the economy actually works at a foundational level. But yeah, and I don't know. I go on Young Turks sometimes and stuff, and I'm friendly with other YouTubers, but I don't know what everybody's always thinking day to day. Yeah.
Okay, so from there, I guess we can jump into Jordan Peterson. Something that's interesting is, out of the kind of newsy outlets on YouTube and on the left, there are other people who are going after Peterson, but specifically in the news and politics category. It seems like the Majority Report, you and Sam Seed are really the only ones going after him. I thought the funniest one was where you did the video about his meltdown, where he's like calling Pankaj Mishra like a sanctimonious prick and saying, if you're in the same room as me, I'd slap you happily.
Slap you happily, yeah. That's anytime, man. If you're at like a club in New York or something, and one guy says, "I'll slap you happily," that's when it's about to happen.
It's about
this
to go
thing
down.
Is getting real serious.
I was just curious what your thoughts on his rise are, and just the cultish fan base of his.
I mean, I don't know, man. You basically said it. It's a cult. I am trying to get more. I mean, I'm trying to look at like what is it that he, like what purpose is he serving for people? I think part of it is that, that kind of mashup where part of it is he's just sort of basically just being like a good, kind of doing basic self-help kind of motivational stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, people need that.
Do you think
And
that's what
and
puts him up though? Because I honestly don't know why he's popular.
I think it's no, I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination. I do
Combination.
think the self-help stuff is part of it. I think there's a lot of guys in search of a father figure, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's funny because I think that now it's subtle, but the media space has changed a little bit, even for like people on the far right. And I think that actually the fact that he's so emotional and he cries and he freaks out, I think people actually like that.
Really?
I think they find it genuine. I mean, I don't
Interesting.
know. It's not my thing. But I think that, and I also think though it's just the same reason that all this other stuff gets popular. He's telling a story that's very self-justifying. And it's also it's the master jujitsu move that all these guys have is that first they take little things, which might even be true like in their own terms. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe some kids are being dumb on a college campus or whatever. I don't know. Maybe people are too uptight about whatever. Things that honestly are relatively trivial
Yeah.
or might only affect you in a very small way in your life, because even all this college campus stuff is relative to like the mass of things going on is nothing.
Right.
And you take this thing and mostly bullshit and mostly a right-wing fantasy.
Yeah.
But then you inflate a little thing and you make it the whole world. And then ironically, a lot of it is, this kind of funny double game where like everybody, it's like, oh, identity politics is so awful except for the identity politics that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And he's doing identity politics of basically like, sort of disillusioned, frustrated, mainly young, angry white men.
That's what it
And
seems like.
that's why it's so cult-like and so fanatical, because
Yeah.
these guys, like, that's what I had to understand, because when I first came into this, like, and I still totally don't get it. I would criticize somebody like, I mean, Sam Harris is another one of these, and in his case, it's just unbelievable because he's so fucking boring. But you would criticize some of these people, and the response, like, I can't think of anybody, like, actors, tennis players I like, rappers, politicians. There is almost nobody in the world outside of my like immediate family or close friends that I would ever have the kind of emotional meltdown about that people do about these people. So like if you criticize somebody I like, I'll say, hey, no, I think you're wrong, or even maybe, oh yeah, that's a fair point, but you're missing whatever. But the way these guys have these like total emotional meltdowns if you
Yeah.
criticize them,
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, it is, as you say, it's cult-like, but it also shows that it's fulfilling a very deep emotional need in them.
That's true.
And I think that that's that's what's going on. And I also, I think it's super. The last thing I'll say too is it's pretty funny to me, and I say this like I have criticisms of identity politics from my more socialist perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but it is mind blowing that guys who run around all day basically telling people, like, if Jordan Peterson was black, with the sense of aggrievement and emotionality that this guy has because of like some annoying like stuff on a college campus,
Mm-hmm.
if he had a life where he actually dealt with something like American racism on a daily basis,
Yeah.
he would either need to be a way more balanced, mature, non-crying person, or he might be like a member of Al Qaeda or something. Like these people who run around talking about stop being victims and
Yeah.
commenting on all of the, like, oh, I don't want to hear about you being a woman or black or Muslim or gay or whatever. Like, shut the fuck up. You're not rational, blah, blah.
Yeah.
These are the biggest bitches in the world.
Yep.
because somebody was rude, because oh, you said Republicans are dumb, or I mean these that to me is the most crazy part of it because I've actually dealt with some, like assholes, but at least like it's cool. It's like that really just is their position. Like toughen
Hmm.
up.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. But these motherfuckers are whining,
Yeah.
complaining little bitches about nothing
Right.
and building an identity politics around it. I mean, the irony is endless.
Did you hear his comment on Joe Rogan saying he found a way to monetize SJWs? Did you hear that or no?
I didn't, but he did. He's right.
Yeah, I thought that was funny just because, and I was wondering kind of your thoughts on that because, like a lot of people, like I had seen like a Steven Crowder tweet writing an article about that and like saying like basically praising him as this kind of epic troll, and other people because I was looking for backlash. I was like, okay, where's the backlash? Because obviously, he has a conflict of interest at this point if it's a monetary gain because then you're just gonna inflate a problem to a point where you can just make more money. And the
Well,
way
dude, you just described all of it. Sorry to
that's what
interrupt.
it seems like. No, yeah,
That's it. That's
yeah,
the whole thing.
yeah,
That describes all of them. They're inflating something to monetize. Look, dude, if you wake up in the morning
yeah.
and you look at this whole fucking world
Mhm.
and you are like, wow, there was some fucking girl at Oberlin was, you know, she said that Pop Tarts were cultural appropriation. That's what I'm going to focus on. Well, yeah, I mean, come on, man, let's be serious. But it's really easy content. I mean,
Yeah.
if I wanted to become right wing and play to like
Oh, it'd be
whoever these
so
fucking,
easy.
it's the easiest shit in the world. It's like, all right, let me find an audience of like, I don't know, like aspiring Thai sex tourists or whoever the fuck it is that watches this shit and go out and be like, you know what, I feel like I just like can't say what I think, like what I feel anymore.
Yeah.
Boom. It's easy. It's the easiest content in the world. But on the other hand, like if you read it's a really good book by this woman that I've had on, and she made the rounds. Angela Nagel. She wrote this really good book called "Kill All Normies," and I think like all of the you know, they're not the same. Like SJWs, as annoying as they could be, are obviously better than the right wing, backlash because things like racism and sexism are actual things that we should actually oppose if we're
Yeah.
normal, functional people.
Right.
But at the same time, they built a perfect foil for these people, and I think that like on the flip side, if all your understanding of politics is just like arguing about people's comedy routines
Yeah.
or who gets to speak or who doesn't get to speak, like then you're not doing politics.
Right.
It's our job to say, first of all, you guys are fucking idiots, you
Right.
don't know what you're talking about, and then to say like like Jordan Peterson, he's running his mouth about Marx all the time, saying Marxism and postmodernism are the same thing. It's just literally wrong.
Mhm.
Like, if his understanding of lobsters are as bad as his understanding of Marx, then
What's up
this
with the
dude
whole
might not
lobster
even
meme?
work.
I see a lot of comments of people making this meme joke about lobsters, but
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what it's about.
Oh, I don't know, dude. He says that like basically that we are lobsters, and he has all these comparisons about how lobsters have hierarchies and shit. I mean, honestly, it's you
Are you
know,
serious?
yeah, I would look into it
Wow.
more. But I mean, honestly, dude, it's just a lot of it's funny. It's like I know like science is very trendy, and in these circles are what people call science. And I'm not saying like, of course, you need to teach actual science, and science is really important. But
Yeah.
like Jordan Peterson is a good example of like especially somebody writing in popular culture who says that their work is like science
Mhm.
grounded. Step the fuck away from that
Yeah.
because they're always giving you, even if it's right, they're always giving you like they're giving you cultural interpretation.
Yeah.
But they're saying they're talking about 3 + 3 = 6, but they're not. They're saying like I found something in nature that might have some objective qualities, but I'm building a story around it, if that makes sense. And just real quick, like the dude has this conspiracy theory, which I don't know if he knows, but goes back to like actually literally like far right fascist and anti-Semitic theorists. That's where the whole idea
Cultural
of
Marxism.
cultural Marxism, yeah, exactly. And so, even if so, he's like, what happened was at a certain point that communism was discredited, so they needed to substitute class with race and gender. Now, first of all, already, like, if we're gonna, be real for a second, in Marxism, class is not an identity like your race or gender. It's an economic functionality. And Marx didn't focus on workers because they were most oppressed. He focused because that's where there's the most contradiction in the economy. So, I'm not trying. I'm just. It's like, the only reason I'm saying this is because like the dude is literally wrong. Like, if somebody says like, here's how you play basketball. First, you get out your baseball bat. You're like, oh, okay. I think I should pause on what the rest of the guy says is, right?
Yeah.
And then he goes and he's like, and then they replaced race and gender, and then that became cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
And now, like, I can't call trannies anymore. Please like and subscribe. So
And they
he
do.
did that shit, right? No, they do. But then the thing was, they definitely do that. Respect to the hustle, although it is an easy hustle.
That's true.
But then he said, so this whole idea of culture, so cultural and postmodernists that he's talking about, which he doesn't understand anyways, for what it's worth, they started writing, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whether you're talking about the Frankfurt School or these French postmodernists, I don't even know what he's really talking about because he's not precise.
Yeah.
They were
think that's
banned.
on
Like,
purpose.
these people were banned in the Soviet Union. They were not like read or promoted official Soviet ideology. And the only other, and I would say, I think, yeah, there's some people on who call themselves left who have a very unsophisticated view of identity and economics, and they kind of play into his idea, but they're not like, they don't know what they're talking about either in some cases. So the whole thing is crazy.
I can't stand his voice personally. That's a big difficulty in me just even listening to him. But here's something else interesting that I want to talk about is Dave Rubin. I'm sure you know Dave Rubin.
Dude, you're really bringing. You wanted me to talk about the DCCC, Jordan Peterson, and Dave Rubin. Do you have anything that's like likable to talk about?
No, I don't think so. No, but Dave Rubin, I want to hear your thoughts on that because obviously he's a Koch brothers sellout, but of course the Majority Report has a really interesting altercation with him, I would call it, and I wanted to hear your perspective because basically, your video criticizing him goes up, and Sam Cedar goes, "Hey Dave, I want to come on your show to have a debate," and then Dave looks at it, sees the video, and says, "Oh, you called me dumb or whatever, so I'm not gonna have you on," and then Sam takes the video down in good faith. But he still won't have him on. So, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, just explain what happened, I guess.
Well, this is just going to doubly ensure that that neither Sam nor myself will ever be on Dave's show. But Dave is the only thing that's interesting about Dave Rubin, because he's, in my opinion, like, even I like watching his stand-up because that's, unintentionally amazingly funny. But he's a boring interviewer. He doesn't even have, like, there's no there.
Right.
But the thing is that he's a pretty genuinely dumb guy, if you ever watch. Like, he's not smart.
Yeah, I've seen that.
But he's craven. So he's at the perfect meeting point. I feel like Jordan Peterson does all these fucking hand gestures, but he's like cynical and stupid, right? That's Dave Rubin.
Right. So
basically what happened was I did a video where, Dave Rubin did, and it's also so funny. He's such a fucking moron.
Yeah,
he was like, yeah, like MLK would be conservative today. It's just like, first of all, that's like,
so
conservatives have been saying that like since before like fucking I was born. Like literally, like it's the oldest, and it takes like the most literally a Google search to
Right.
find out that MLK actually identified himself as a Christian socialist, right?
Yep. Yep.
And supported wealth redistribution, affirmative action, opposed imperialism. This is not like, oh, I would never ask
Yeah.
Dave Rubin to read a book, right? But I am fair here. I'm acting in good faith. I would never ask him to read a book. By the way, that's one of my favorite things about Dave Rubin is that when he wants to like duck out, like when somebody's like, hey, like you say you're a libertarian, but you support single payer healthcare, like how does that work?
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm really interested in ideas.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that.
That's
I've
like
seen
the
that.
dumbest. That's like going up to some like fucking like morbidly obese
Yeah.
person who's just like, yeah, I don't really have time for that. I'm really into training right now.
Yeah.
Like the idea that Dave Rubin is not involved in like the details of policy because
Yeah.
he's reading John Stuart Mill. I mean, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
Come
I
on.
know. I've
Like,
seen
I
him
mean,
tweet
dude, like
out.
at least, yeah, just at least say, hey, I'm sorry. I'm just making stupid money doing no research, promoting petty grievances, and I'd
Yeah.
prefer to I don't know, watch I don't know, a rerun, fucking Entourage or some shit, whatever the fuck you watch. Like ideas. Come on, let's be serious.
So, did you
I'll
see?
finish the story in a second, but yeah,
Okay. No, go ahead. Go and continue with it.
that's a preamble. So I put out this video
Yeah.
where we made fun of him for the MLK thing, and
Right.
whatever, just like not it wasn't it's not even it's like taking candy from nothing, like
Right.
not even a baby, right? And then and so the video goes up, and Dave is, because Dave, I feel like he does this a little bit less now, but he still had some investment in sort of like pretending that he was like, oh, I'm really serious about ideas and come one, come all, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so people would periodically tweet, like, oh, we'll have Sam Cedar and Michael Brooks on.
Yeah.
And especially at that point, like, I mean, even now, like, obviously Sam's, very big.
Yeah.
And this is before I even started my show.
Mm-hmm.
So that really turned into, a thing, especially with Sam. It's like, who Sam is, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
the guy, right? Like, Majority is a big show. He's on MSNBC.
Yeah.
And here it is. Great. You want to, and so this is where it's like, yeah, Dave Rubin's a dumb guy, but he's not dumb enough to think that he could actually debate policy with Sam Cedar.
He can't.
Or even, frankly, like the shit he's obsessed with. Like, Sam would, they could have debate rules where it's like, all right, Dave, pick your irrelevant college story of choice, and Sam can't read anything about it, and he would still smoke Dave Rubin in a debate, right? Mm-hmm. So Dave then had to be like, well, I don't know who you. I think he literally pretended to not exactly know who Sam was.
Really?
And I could be misremembering. I don't remember all the details.
That's shocking. Because he was on TYT, so I mean, he had to have known something about Sam.
I have no. I don't quote me on that. I don't remember. But he went to. And then he immediately found the video that went up, and the title was, Dave Rubin's an idiot or something. Mm-hmm. And then he was just like, well, you call me dumb. So
that was his cop out.
That was his cop out. And then Sam violated my free speech.
Yeah.
And shut down my exchange of ideas.
Yeah, no marketplace of ideas anymore.
I was literally censored in the marketplace of ideas.
That's true.
Because of Dave Rubin. Yeah. Which is, like, if you think about it, a threat to Western civilization.
Yeah.
Because he was acting, I mean, for all of his, like, willingness to have on racists and crackpots and alt-right figures, apparently
he should bring you on the show because your free speech was censored.
It was censored. It was amazing. I mean, he was a total SJW beta cuck, violating, and then Sam gave him a safe space.
Yeah.
Sam violated my free speech to give him a safe space.
That's true.
Still no debate. Because again, I mean, he's dumb, but he's not quite that dumb.
Did you see David Pakman's interview with Dave Rubin by any chance? Did you see any of it? Did you see David Pakman's debate or interview with Dave Rubin?
I think I saw a small, I think I saw, didn't Dave do that whole, like, Didn't Pakman ask him some like really basic like tax policy question or something? And it's like, I think about
He didn't even say that. He just said because he had no clue. That was probably That was when
Yeah.
I realized
Yeah, I
that Dave
saw a
Rubin was
second
an
of that.
idiot. That was when I
Oh
realized
yeah.
that Dave Rubin doesn't know anything. Was then, but yeah, that was
Yeah, no,
hilarious.
he was totally doing
He didn't know it.
kid who didn't like dumb kid who didn't do the
Yeah,
reading.
yeah,
Like, oh, taxes you ask.
yeah, yeah,
Well, I am told by the freedom philosophers.
yeah,
And then you go and you watch this guy doing stand up. His stand up is literally like demography. Like,
yeah,
there are gay people here.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
That was the whole thing. Was just
that was
doing
literally
that.
the whole thing. And then he had a new one. Apparently, he's back to doing stand up. And now it's
Yeah,
just, are there conservatives here?
yeah,
Are there libertarians here? I mean, I don't look. Let me tell you something. If you are a middling fucking talent and a comedian that isn't funny, a talk show host that doesn't know anything,
yeah,
you have zero integrity. I gotta recommend right wing YouTube because
yeah.
there is clearly unlimited opportunity there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I thought we'd jump into talking a little bit about Sam Harris because this is an interesting topic because
You want like every single enraged virgin in the entire web to be a
yes, I do.
fuck is the matter
That'd be
with you, dude?
amazing. That'd be
This
amazing. I would be absolutely
three-horseman, like,
honored if that happened.
and bad faith and out of context and blah blah blah.
That would be I would truly be honored if that happened. But so I was really curious about this because so I want to kind of ground this because I want to know exactly where your disagreements are with Sam Harris and just kind of figure out exactly where they are because I don't know, I'm a little bit torn on Sam Harris because on the one hand he's sort of a liberal guy, but on the other hand he's like sort of a neocon when it comes to foreign policy specifically. He's
Well,
more
and
of
also
yeah, he's
race.
going on with that whole stuff now. So I was just curious what your thoughts are on Sam and just I was just hoping we could kind of get into like what your disagreements are with him.
Oh, I mean, I've just done. I'm actually really burned out on Sam, but I wish he was somebody I didn't need to know about. But it's actually kind of what bothers me about Sam is even just like the fact that someone like you still has some ambiguity about him.
I have a
just think
lot of
like,
ambiguity about him.
yeah, I know. I think like whatever, cool. He's pro-choice or whatever. It's irrelevant. I mean, his main. I think and the atheism thing is cool, whatever. I don't know. Like, I find his writing on religion, and to be fair, I didn't grow up in a religious household, so maybe if I had to get that out emotionally, it would be one thing, but it's like a 14-year-old boy. It's like, dude, I get it. I know. I agree. Creationism isn't real. Like, you're a fucking adult. Like, what do you like? These issues are complicated, and even the way religion works in society is a pretty big deal. And just being an asshole about it is not going to achieve anything, as fun as it may be. No, I mean, look, the guy's just... It's no surprise to me that if you adopt his worldview, and even the fact that whether or not he still says he thinks certain ways on certain issues, he's absolutely a member of the right.
Really? So you think he's right wing?
Dude, if you think, again, the biggest problem in society is SJWs or PC or whatever, you have no economic analysis of the world. You jump on
I
Charles.
think he has some analysis though, because I've heard him advocate for universal basic income, like sometime in the future.
Okay.
So I was just, and he's also anti-Trump and stuff like that. So I mean, I don't know. You think it's fair to put him in as a right winger?
I think if you are a neocon in foreign policy who promotes Charles Murray, I would say not only are you a right winger, you're actually on the extreme. Like, I know conservative Republicans who are like, "Whoa, Charles Murray's a racist. Why would Sam Harris have him on?" It's, to me, politics isn't just piecemeal issues. It's how you look at the world and how you think strategically and broadly. And Sam Harris, basically, he doesn't do history. He doesn't do policy. He doesn't do... So if you think you can figure out the Middle East, South Asia, the balancing pieces of everything from the United States to Saudi Arabia to Iran through the Quran is bad, I don't even know if that's conservative. That's just stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, to the point where it's like, this idea that you can explain things like terrorism through bad ideas is literally even contradicted by his own buddy's story. Like if you listen to Majid Nawaz, who I'm also not a big fan of, although I don't think he should have been put on that hate list, but whatever, that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
His own story of how he supposedly became radicalized is one of, I saw things happening to Muslims overseas by the United States, and it made me angry.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is going on national tours with somebody whose own narrative directly contradicts what Sam is talking about. And if you look at how things actually work in the real world, like ideas are spread through money, power, and influence and material conditions. And that's also why he jumps right into race science. Because, and in a way that's almost doubly negative and doubly irresponsible and disgusting. Because the truth is, at least Charles Murray is disingenuous, but Charles Murray has a political agenda. Charles Murray,
he does. That's something a lot of people don't know.
Charles Murray is trying to say, because also his recent book is called Coming Apart, which is about poor white people. So he makes a cultural instead of genetic case. But the whole point of Charles Murray's work, going back to the 70s, is to make sure that we don't have a social safety net.
Yeah.
And to formalize class hierarchies.
Yeah.
So the reason that he is making, and be very clear, first of all, IQ is a absolutely questionable test, which people should not take uncritically. Number two, going back to the 70s, when Charles Murray said that environment had already been taken into account and the rest was genetics, he literally meant that in the 1970s that for a couple of years, segregation had been legally outlawed and that there were a couple of social programs like Head Start. If you know anything about American history, from slavery to American apartheid to housing discrimination, you know that that's not only a wrong statement, it's like morally deranged.
Right.
Sam Harris is so in whatever his bizarre grievance single track boxes that not only, in a way it's even worse, because Charles Murray is purely a political figure, and Sam Harris saw a guy whose entire work is to, undermine basically social spending and social justice, and then was like, the most important thing here is that Charles Murray should be allowed to, needs to speak and he's a freedom fighter and all this other bullshit. It's actually really, honestly, it's disgusting. You know what I mean?
So to be clear on the Charles Murray thing, because apparently, like, at the speech he was giving or whatever, like, one of his aides was, like, actually concussed, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like that, because I think that is something that we should be straightforward and say that that's like stupid, and that people should be able to speak.
Well, it's stupid that the way those students handled it was stupid, because he wouldn't even have been on the public radar or even gotten Sam Harris to do this interview. So I don't agree. Strategically and tactically, I disagree with that. If Charles Murray comes to your campus, ideally, actually, just ignore him. Or if you're going to go, confront him on either the merits of his argument, which are highly shaky, or, remind people that the guy burned a cross when he was in high school in his town in Iowa, and then claimed to not know what it was. Maybe his IQ wasn't high enough. These people are fucking disgusting. And I think that, Sam Harris is so, he's profoundly myopic.
So your main criticisms of Sam are his, what I would deem neocon foreign policies.
Sam Harris, I mean, he's wrong and dangerous on very, very, very serious things. And also where he's right, it's like so obvious that he's not pointing anything out that everybody else, like, even if you're interested in the ideological foundations of Islamic terrorism and the unique dangers of that, then read like you know, an actual scholar on that issue.
Mhm.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I've never seen somebody. He's useless, and with a major downside.
Okay. All right, man. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. It's an amazing conversation. Uh,
Oh, thanks, buddy.
any last words you got?
Keep doing what you're doing, man.
All
You
right.
making it happen. Thanks a
All
lot.
right.